70 years has passed since the chains of the gates of the death camps were broken and the locks torn off the doors. And while it seems like a lifetime ago, their stories are critical. They're critical for our elders to tell and for the rest of us to hear, and especially our youth, who need to know what happened, to not only honor our survivors and those who perished, but to ensure this type of a tragedy never happens again. Today we are blessed to hear from one such survivor. Al joins me today. Al, thanks for joining me. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, you were 13 years old?
I was 13, yes.
And you were in summer camp?
Yes.
So why don't we start there today? So prior to that, you had grown up a fairly healthy, happy young boy. You're in camp. And
Well, the summer camp was an integrated summer camp. Our school system was segregated in Kovner. So but the Soviets were by us in 1941, the summer 1941, and I was sent to an integrated summer camp. 100 Christian children, 100 Jewish children. The camp was located very close to the German border. I remember Saturday night we were at a bonfire in the woods, singing songs. We went to bed late, around 10 o'clock. And 3 o'clock in the morning, the war broke out. The Germans opened fire with a heavy artillery. Our leaders decided to make a run for it. So we ran north towards Latvia. We ran all day Sunday. And overnight we stayed in a barn. We woke up in the morning. The Germans were there already. And they sent us back. We should go back to Polanga, where we came from. The next morning, being Tuesday morning, right after breakfast, they told us to get our belongings and report outside. And then they marched us to the marketplace, where all the Jews from the vicinity, must have been around 150 people. We joined them. We were all guarded by German soldiers, all men between the ages of 17 and 55 to step forward. There must have been around 35 or 40 guys at that age. And they put them on the 2 trucks and they drove off. About half an hour later, a Lithuanian woman came running. She was across the street and she was yelling, "Nušovė vyrus," which meant they shot the men. So the women started crying, and this was we were in for now, that they're shooting people, innocent people. I'm sure they didn't even...
Before she called out to you and told you what happened, was it in your thinking this was temporary and you'd be going home soon?
I think our minds were lost. We didn't understand what was going on, really. From there, they took us to a small synagogue in town where we were squeezed in like sardines because there were still about 100 and so Jews from the village and from the vicinity, and we were still 100 kids. And the synagogue was built probably for about 80 people. So we were squeezed in there, and we stayed there overnight. In the morning, a German officer stopped by, and he saw that we were suffocating, and he gave orders to break all the windows and leave the doors open. Thinking back now, I think he must have been a decent fella, because Germans, but he was thinking of us. And the next day, they led us to town, where we had to burn all the library books and all the pictures of Stalin and all the red flags, and we had to light them from 5 corners, so there was like the red star. And the next day they brought us back to town, where we had to take all the prayer books out of the little synagogue where we were, and put them outside and light them from 6 corners, like the Star of David. And now there was a big mixture of Lithuanians already. There was more Lithuanians now than Germans, but Germans were still there too. And they were laughing while we were crying, burning the prayer books. And we were looking up to the heavens and see why God is letting this happen. I think that was probably the worst day through the whole 4 years that I went through.
That day?
That day. I mean, to burn our books, and that hurt more than anything.
Did you go to synagogue regularly?
Actually not, no. I used to go when I was smaller, I used to go with my father. My father had a good voice. He sometimes used to lead the services. We went to a very old, we used to call it a clois. In Yiddish was a clois. Instead of a synagogue or temple, we called it a clois. And it was a very old building, and I remember that the women used to sit upstairs on a balcony, and the windows were cut out like diamonds. People know, I look back now, boy, it's very unfair, you know, with the men downstairs and the women upstairs, and they had nothing to say or nothing to get in. That's why I like Reformed and conservative temples, you know. That's big changes. And so we were there 8 days, and one nice day, 2 buses from our hometown showed up. Apparently our mothers, or whoever had money to pay the transport company to send 2 buses up to pick us up. I came home and my mother was happy to see me, even though I lost my good shoes. But my brother Laser was gone, and my brother Pesach was gone, and my little sister Riva was gone. My little sister Riva was only 6 years old. And before I go further, I'll tell you that in Kovner, we had 2 daily Jewish newspapers. Our everyday language was Jewish. So we knew what the Germans were bringing when they were coming. So most of our people were on the run, trying to get away. Now, my little sister was running with them, and she was tired. They put her on a wagon, and planes started coming and shooting and throwing bombs, and the horses got wild and they took off. And my little sister ended up in a different ghetto in Daugapilis in Latvia. And that ghetto was actually didn't last very long. But she was there, she was an orphan, she was there with other Jews. And it was a Lithuanian Christian woman that told her husband, he worked in a ghetto, said, pick up an orphan and bring her out. Tell the Germans that it's your niece, that she was lost on the road. And he got away with it. They picked her up and brought her to this lady. Her name was Zosi, and she saved her life. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been at all. Right now, she survived the war. She got married. She had 2 sons. Laser, my brother Laser, was in Russia. He got away. They didn't take him in the army because he had bad eyesight, so he survived the war. My brother Pesach was taken in the Red Army, and he was killed in 1943 near Kiev, I know. Well, now came a time where, this is beginning July 1941, where the orders came to wear the yellow star front and back, and you were not allowed to use the sidewalk. And they were taking hostages. They filled the jail full of people in case there's a German was shot somewhere. 100 hostages would be killed.
What was happening in your home then? What was happening in Kovner for you?
Well, now I'm back in Kovner, where first of all, I heard there was the massacre in Slobodka. The night before the Germans arrived, Lithuanians killed around 800 Jews in Slobodka. It was a Jewish suburb. This was later on where the ghetto was made. Now, this is now July, maybe July 10th or so. The Germans gave Lithuanians a free hand to pick up Jews to the 7th fort. The 7th fort, Kovner was surrounded with about 10 forts that was built by the Tsar probably in the early 19th century. Those forts were bunkers for soldiers. So on the 7th fort is where they took all those that they picked up from the street. If you walked in the street and you wore your yellow star and people knew that you were Jewish, Lithuanians would pick you up and take you to the 7th fort. There they were tortured. They stuck, let's say, 500 people into one bunker where they were suffocating and with no food or drink. And when they ran out of room in the bunkers, there were, I guess, 4 bunkers, they put people in a field And in a field, they would shoot into the crowd. And they told the people not to get up. Anybody getting up would be shot. Well, this went on for 7 days, and a couple thousand people were killed there. And after 7 days, the Germans said, whoever is still alive, let them go home.
You survived this, where they sent you home because you'd survived being out in the field, the ghetto, and the barracks. So at this point, you know the war's not over. Are you thinking it's behind you, or are you thinking more's coming?
You lived from day to day. Now was the orders to come to the ghetto. The ghetto was supposed to be closed August 15, 1941. And now you had to find a place to move in the ghetto. They designed a place enough for 5,000 people. And we were still, at this point, close to 30,000 Jews in Kovner. So they formed a ghetto, actually 2 ghettos, a small ghetto that held 3,000 people, and a large ghetto that held about 27,000 people.
By the way, at this time, are you with your mom and your dad?
I'm still with my mom, dad, and my 2 older sisters. But we're not in the ghetto yet, but you first got to find a place to move to. We had to go into a schoolhouse with probably another 100 families. Well, now they were looking for 500 people that were smart, intelligent people that can speak multi-languages and college graduates, and they offered them a good job and good shelter and good food. And they needed 500, but 700 volunteered. And they took the 500, and the next day we found out they took them to the Ford Fort. They were shot. So much they wanted to eliminate the very smart, educated people. So they did. After that came the gold auction, where they were confiscating gold and silver, coin collections, stamp collections, and so on. And I always bring that up because I had a stamp collection that I started from first grade, and I burned it when I were cooking some potatoes in the fire. Well, this gold collection, and that went on for weeks and weeks, because they started out by saying you get 24 hours to bring it to the Komitet. By the way, there was a Jewish government, the Jewish Komitet, like Judenrat in German. And there was a Judenärzte, and there was a labor department, and a health department, and police. There was like 80 police that they made. So it was like a small Jewish government there. They got the orders from the Germans, and they passed it on to us. And the orders were to bring all the gold and all the silver, including wedding rings and including everything. And most people, I would say, turned the gold over, but some of them maybe buried that gold, you know, because later on it came in handy, that gold. After that, they went from house to house searching for gold, but at the same time, they were robbing the people. If they saw a nice piece of furniture, out it goes. They had a truck outside, they had people helping, you know, Jewish people helping them unload. If they saw a nice suit hanging, they took it away. The Germans were robbers. They not only killed, but they robbed. Some for themselves and some for the government, but this went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, because they went through the whole ghetto, to every house, just to take whatever they felt like was good. Well, after that, the Aktionen really started. First of all, they burned October 6th, I remember, where they burned the big hospital in a small ghetto. The big hospital was a 2-story big building, was a wooden building though. They boarded up the doors and boarded up the windows, and they burned the building down together with the patients, with the nurses, with the doctors in it. It was like 250 people burned up there.
By the way, so in this year plus that you're in the ghetto, what was your daily life life?
Daily life was, well, in the morning I used to run out. There were still potato fields where the farmer already harvested the potatoes, but he left a lot of them in the ground. Those fields were guarded by the Jewish police, and if they caught you, you'd end up in jail. So, but I was always fast enough to grab a few potatoes and get back with them. And the rations were pretty small, but they did give horse meat at that time. So we had some horse meat, but food was very scarce from the very beginning in Ghetto. So October 28, everyone had to report to this one place. It was called Democratu Place, of all names, Democratu Place. And that field, all of us, like 27,000 of us, had to be there. Anyone found in a ghetto itself would be shot. So everyone had to walk to this place. And you had to go in front. A German was sitting by a desk. He was a sergeant, and his name was Raucher, I remember. Later on, I guess they caught him. But anyway, at that point, he was moving. He looked at you as a family. You came up in front of him as a family, and he made a decision within a split second, to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right, anyway he just said. If to his right was the death penalty, to the left, you go back to the ghetto. And that's how fast he started. That's why it took all day, really. And the rain, the fine rain was falling, a cold rain. That's how I always think that God was crying for us, because it was really a terrible day. You knew right away that this site, if you went to that site, you were taken by the Lithuanian soldiers with rifles. And if you didn't move fast enough, they hit you. So they all ended up in a small, 10,000 people were sorted out. They were put in a small ghetto. And the next day they were taken to the 9th Fort and they were shot. So we lost most of our people. Now you had about 17,000 left. And now there was little more room in the ghetto. So we moved from the schoolhouse, I remember, to a place was Tulginsko number 37. I remember the numbers. It was a corner house of Paniero and Skuldinsko, and it was a one room and a small little kitchen. Now the winter of 1941 was the coldest on record, and they promised we would get wood, but we never did. We burned down all the fences and whatever wood you get a hold of. So it was a very bitter winter, and like I say, my father I had an obligation to work one day a week at the airport. And once you get to the job, it was always you used either a shovel or a spade to dig the ground. They were extending the runways. They had other brigades too, where people worked in town. People worked, let's say, for a rubber factory, they worked for a leather factory, there was other factories in town, but the hardest one was outside, especially in the wintertime, where the wind was blowing, and I'd look up and I'd say, I'd ask God, why? We were really, suffering there was awful.
As you tell us your story, and you think about it in your private moments at home, does it amaze you to think, as you tell us the story, you survived this?
Yeah, thank God, so many years later, and I'm still here.
Because I know when I listen to you tell the story, and I assume for many of us in this room, we hear the story, and we wonder, how on God's earth did you survive? Did anyone? Because I don't know if many of us hear your story think we could survive what you're telling us you survived.
You probably would too, because I was young at that time. I still had the stamina. I was 13. I was maybe in pretty good shape. I could, even though I was very, very cold, your skin was burning, was 10 below zero. It was very cold out there. And there was a big clock, I remember, and I always looked at the clock, and it seemed like I was there a lifetime already. It's still 8 o'clock. The clock moved very slow, like it was frozen. The day was a very long day. Finally, 12 o'clock was lunchtime. The whistle blew, and you did go to a building there, I remember, and you got soup. And the soup was a hot, nice soup. It was cabbage and carrots, whatever it was. It tasted very, very good. But that half hour went like this.
Yeah, right.
Right? Well, anyway.
But anyway, so how did you get from the ghetto into the camps? At what point were you moved?
Oh.
And how long did you stay with your family?
We moved a couple times. They were forced to move us. They were making the ghetto smaller. So we moved from this Turginsko to a different place, and then to a place where there was an unfinished building, because they were making the ghetto smaller all the time. So we came to an unfinished building where we brought our furniture up, and where there was no electricity, no windows, no doors. It was just, so we were there. But anyway, we got the orders October 20th, I guess, that we had to report to the gate and bring only what you can carry, like clothing, like underwear and winter clothes. And so we came to that gate, October 20th. That's why Howard was also part of that transport. Or 365 people, families. And Howard's family was there too.
Who is Howard?
Well, Howard Melton is that we survived together because in Stutthof, after Riga, we were in Riga under the German Air Force. And we worked in the airport over there. And in 1943, in September 43, the SS took over. And they were in charge. We were part of Kaiserwald. Howard's family was there. He had his little sister. His little sister was the same age as my little sister, Riva, see? And in 1943, like I say, the SS took over, and then they brought in women from Auschwitz, and they brought in people from Germany. Now it gets crowded. The place was really crowded. And in fall, in September 43, we were now part of the Camp Kaiserwald. And my father was transferred to Kaiserwald, where very shortly after that passed away. So my father was gone. But my mother and two sisters were still in that camp. And now in March 1944, they had a Kinderaktion by us too, where we came back from work and all the kids were gone, including Howard's little sister. And they were all taken to Auschwitz to be gassed. So if my little sister was not saved by this woman, then she'd be with them, yeah. So that's how she was saved.
Were you separated from your dad when he died, or were you near him?
My dad was suddenly he was transferred to Kaiserwald, to the main camp.
But were you there too at that time?
No, I was not there. No, I stayed in Spilbe, in that camp where we were to start with. They just took him.
So as you're telling us your story, things get worse and worse and worse. What happened to your hope? What happened to your spirit that somehow this would all end? Did you think that, or did you said day by day?
No,
what was going through your mind?
You just went day by day. Like I say, when the SS took over, things turned around. See, the discipline, the eating, and everything else changed a lot because they meant to hurt us, not just work, but like on a Pelplatz, where you had to be counted. The colder the day, the colder the wind was blowing, and you had to stand there either still and straight up and pull your cap down. The colder it was, the longer the commandant was talking. He was making speeches, the lousy Jews and this and that we're at fault with everything and that we're guilty of everything. And it's like I say, it seemed like a lifetime when he was talking. His name was Zorge, and he was the butcher of Sachsenhausen, they called him. And at the very end of every speech, and those speeches were repeated, it's the same talk again and again. At the end, he would say, 5 Minuten zu 12 wird alle erledigt, meaning 5 minutes to 12, you'd all be wiped off. He let us know that. So anyway, it's now the Russian front was getting closer, and they shipped us from from Riga to Ponevėžys, that's a small town in Lithuania. But at least we got rid of this commandant. Of this guy didn't come along with this. There was a new guy, and this camp was already in May 1944, and was like a lot of tents, big tents for women and for men. We were there about a month or maybe 5 weeks or so, and then in June we were sent to Shavel. Shavel was also a ghetto, and I remember that's the first time I saw on a Friday night people were lighting candles, because I haven't seen that for a long time, since home. You know, and it's kind of brought back that people were lighting candles. The woman was lighting candles. Anyway, we stayed there 1 week. I remember we stayed in the attic because the place was overcrowded, the Shavla Ghetto. And then from there, we were taken by train to Stutthof. Stutthof was a big concentration camp. And in Stutthof is where I'd say goodbye to my mother and my 2 sisters. They were still alive. This was July 1944. And so Howard and I, and Howard's father was there too. We had to go to a search party where you dropped all your clothes and you went where they searched you front and back, and you went through showers, and on the other side you got your striped uniforms, your striped clothes. And from there on, they took us to the barracks. We went to the barracks, and they put us in a barrack where was normally held 72 people because there were 8 bunks. 9 people to a bunk should be 72, and we were about 230. So we ended up laying on the floor anywhere. You didn't undress there. In the morning, we had to report they were taking a transport. So Howard's father went to with the first transport, and we were left behind. So now Howard and I really got close because you were looking to be friends with someone, a buddy, because there was another transport that left, and we didn't get to that one either. But the third one, that took a long time. We were there about a month. And the people in charge of us were 2 Poles with a green triangle. See, we had triangles too. Now our numbers with triangles were yellow. A yellow triangle is a Jew. A red triangle is a political prisoner. And a green triangle is a criminal. And those 2 guys were criminals. And they were just having fun with us, chasing us in with sticks and chasing us out with sticks. Always, it was fun for them, you know. And they chased us outside, and we had to sit in the sand just to pass the day. And without work, you know, the Germans are not going to keep you long. So we always tried to get into a transport. So next time around, we did get in. And they took us south. They took us to Dachau. Well, actually, we bypassed Dachau. We went to Uting, Amameze. There was camp number 10.
By the way, were you all aware of how many camps there were? I mean, was the communication about what was going on, how widespread it was, clear to you?
Well, in July, we heard about they tried to kill Hitler, July 20th.
We did hear
in 1944. We got the news, and I wish the hell they would have killed him, then my mother and my 2 sisters would have lived. See, my mother didn't survive. She died in Stutthof in December 12th, 1944. My 2 sisters really survived, but they died right after they were liberated by the Russians. But there was a sickness at that time. They had like a spotted fever, and hundreds of women perished at that time. So I got the news later on in Munich from someone that they were together. Anyway, so now we're like I say, we left Stutthof, we are in Dachau, we are in this Außenlager number 10, and this camp held 550 people. And they had 11 barracks, and the barracks were made so partly in the ground. They were like, you walk down 3 steps, and I would dug out about 4 feet into the ground and about 3 feet wide. And on both sides underground were boards. 25 people slept on one side and 25 on the other side. And the roof laid on top of the ground like this. And the roof was covered with grass. From the outside, you couldn't even see it was a camp. But there was barbed wires, and there was a tower, a watching tower, and so on. We didn't have hot water, and we didn't have soap. You naturally didn't have towels or nothing. You got up in the morning, you just went, there was a sprinkler, a cold sprinkler. You wiped your face, you washed your face, and this was the beginning of the day. In January, February 1945, the rations were down to 10 people to a loaf of bread, and soup only once a day. So it was really starvation, and a lot of times the bread would come moldy. Now, as time went on, we were still there. A lot of people were dying out naturally. They brought in new ones. People died. They brought in new ones. We were still the same. And we kept on working. The only thing we really enjoyed is the airplanes. We used to see the American planes come in the daytime. I sometimes counted 1,000 planes. They would fly over by us going to Munich. And they bombed Munich again and again.
Did that give you some hope at that point that the end of all this was coming?
Well, we knew it was coming, yeah.
You did?
Whether we'd survive, we didn't know, but we knew it was coming because you could see by the planes and by everything that things were happening. But
At what date were you liberated?
we were liberated May 2nd.
So after you were liberated,
place, yeah.
where did you go?
Well, that's a story in itself. So, see, I want to say that first of all, we had to march back to Dachau. Yeah, from where we were, we had a 2-day march to come to the main camp, Dachau. Because now we were full of lice. Because, like I said, we didn't have hot water and soap. When we came back to Dachau, we walked through the gate where Arbeit macht frei. We went to the showers, and on the other side they gave us clean underwear and clean clothes. And then we were in, they had makeshift barracks over in Dachau because they were overcrowded. And the next morning they told us to report to the gate, and we did. We went back to the gate, and I remember they gave us a can of meat. It was German army meat, really, with a nice chunk of bread. Well, this was supposed to last us because we were marching out from Dachau going south. But Howard and I remember we ate the meat right away because we were starved. We couldn't hold it. So we marched south, and over there it's let's say we're going through Bad Tils, and on the other side of Bad Tils we were put in a ravine really. Well, we thought this might be the place where we'd end up being shot. Because it was dark outside. It was not a dug-out ravine, it was a natural ravine. But we ended there, and in the morning they yelled, "Raus, raus," and we got out again, and we were marched another mile or so, and then we laid in a field, and overnight the Germans disappeared. We woke up in the morning, and the Germans were gone. And then we were led to a small village there, Waakirchen, and I remember a farmer cooked up some oatmeal-type soup, and in the afternoon, the American tanks came. So,
I want to get a couple questions from our audience. One
well,
question.
but right after this, Howard and I, we both got sick, and dozens, many of us got typhoid, because we ate a dead horse, and I don't know why we got sick. And so, but the American ambulances took us to Munich and took us to a hospital, a Catholic hospital. It was called Schwabing. And we were in Schwabing a couple of weeks. And from there, they sent us to a DP camp in Kempten. And in that camp, DP camp, weren't any Jews. There was mostly Russian laborers and Poles, Czechs, Yugoslavs, but no Jewish people. Howard and I and maybe half a dozen other guys that were Jewish. So we tried, and this was a camp again. You were locked in. It was a self-enclosed camp with an iron gate in front, with an American guard, and you couldn't get out. So we were locked up again, actually. We had food, but we couldn't go in town. They gave you an 8-hour pass once a week. So Howard and I, we went to town one day, and we saw a Russian embassy there. And we figured, so rather than being locked up, we'll see, maybe we should go home. So we signed up with them to go back to Russia, back home, back to Kovner. And, but in the meantime, one day we were in camp by us, and ambulances are coming in, and people are getting into those ambulances. And I figured, well, they must be going someplace, let's get in there too. So Howard and I got into those ambulances, and they took us to Gauting to a hospital, and we were checked out for TB. This was, that hospital kind of specialized in people with TB. And we were kind of found that we didn't have TB, but they let us stay there. And this was a very nice place, and you could go to town. We were free, and good food. Oh, by the way, when we left the hospital in Schwabing, they gave us German army uniforms, but they were dyed navy blue. So we wore German army uniforms. Because a lot of people say, why didn't you save their striped clothes? Well, I was in no position to save anything. I was sick. I went to a crisis, and I just barely made it. Yeah.
I had the opportunity to talk with Elie Wiesel, and he talked about how angry he was with God and how the anger has lessened but never gone away.
I was angry. I was, I really, well, you know, you question it, but I realized that God didn't do it. It's bad people that did it.
Somebody want to know about what happened with your family members. Did you reunite with them after the war?
Well, Laser, like I say, well, he's in Cleveland. He's 96. He's still alive. But
did Eva come back to her Jewish roots after the war? Did she stay a Christian?
Riva?
Yeah.
Oh, Riva, no, she became Jewish. She married a Jewish man, yeah. Yeah, she married a Jewish man. I wouldn't say they're religious either. But they're Jewish.
Can you talk about the role your family has played in your life from when you came home from the war to now?
So I came to this country, I came to New York, and there were like about half a dozen of us that didn't have anyone in the States. And they kind of divided us, and said, well, he asked me first where I'd like to go, but then at the same time he already had the card, the train ticket. He said, well, Milwaukee is a very good city, and they speak German, and you'll get by, because I didn't speak the language. And so he handed me the ticket, and I came to Milwaukee, and it was my very lucky day, and I met my beautiful wife. And Howard met his wife, and it's through his engagement that I met my wife.
And you and Ruth have been married 62?
62 years.
Yeah. You taught me a phrase at your house the other day, and I think it's appropriate to wrap up with it. Is it a geschenkter Tag?
Geschenkter Tag, yeah.
A geschenkter Tag, yeah, my Yiddish teacher. What does that mean?
A geschenk is a gift, and a Tag is a day. So a gift a day, in plain words, and every extra day is a gift from God, I guess.
Yeah.
That's how it is. Yeah.
Every day a gift from God. What a nice way to end our morning session today. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for listening.